الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على خيرة خلق الله أجمعين وهو رحمة الله للعالمين وهو أبو القاسم المصطفى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الميامين المهديين المعصومين المظلومين المقتولين ولعنة الله دائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وعادا وثمود وقد تبين لكم من مساكنهم وزين لهم الشيطان أعمالهم فصدهم عن السبيل وكانوا مستبصرين. I want to continue with the subject from last night, as I mentioned, part 2, the second case study. But tonight I would entitle tonight's discussion as evil in the clothing of good, right? When evil is clothed in good, but in reality it's evil, right? The inside is evil, but the clothing on the outside is good. Evil in the clothing of good. And I begin with this verse again from Surah Al-Ankabut, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the people of Ad and Thamud, that they knew what they were doing was wrong. They were mustabsireen, right? And again, this idea of having knowledge of something being wrong and then yet doing wrong is a state of being or a psychological state that the Quran speaks about quite a bit. It's discussed at length in the Quran. Why do people do wrong things even though they know they're wrong? I mean, that's $1 million question, isn't it? I remember my daughter asking me innocently, she says, why would someone commit genocide and murder and kill thousands of children if they know it's wrong? Like why would they do that? Why would somebody do that unless they're crazy or they're, I mean, do they not see the effects of their actions? And these are very difficult conversations to have with a child, because children, how do they understand that? Why? Why would a human being do that? Right? An educated human being. By educated, I mean someone who's gone to school and, educated in the United States and so on and so forth. The answer to that question, I found a beautiful answer to this question. Of course, we're going to go into depth to discuss it tonight, but there's a beautiful book by a Muslim, a convert actually. His name is Charles Eaton. He wrote this book sometime in the 60s, converted in the 50s, and he wrote this book called King of the Castle. And in the chapter of this book, it's called Liberty and Obedience. And he begins to explore this tension between freedom and obedience, and why sometimes people who know better stand by and watch terrible things happen, or sometimes participate in those terrible acts themselves. And he says in this book, in the chapter entitled Liberty and Obedience, I don't remember the chapter title, it's called King of the Castle, is the name of the book. And it's a very profound book. I've been reading this book for maybe 5 or 6 years now, the same book over and over and over again. And he says in this book, he says, naked evil can seldom operate in our world. It must wear a dress acceptable to the morality of the people of the period, of the time. For men are only successfully misled if they believe that they are following a path of virtue. Meaning, evil itself, however gross it may be, the people that perpetrate it, as I mentioned last night, in the case of the attack on the house of Fatima Zahra, truly believed, or at least claimed to truly believe, that what they're doing is right. It's a psychological state. It's a state of being. The Quran speaks about this with regards to Fir'aun as well. And one of the most insightful things that I read there again is about the Second World War and the Nazis. Right? Because a question I remember while I was in graduate school, in my first year of my doctorate, one of my professors raised a very fascinating question. He said, if the majority of Germans were Christians, and arguably the most educated society in Europe at the time, the most highly qualified, everything, even in religion, some of the greatest scholars in Europe, non-Muslims, of Arabic literature, some of the earliest scholars of Shia Islam in Europe were out of Germany. I mean, Germans weren't only good in engineering, I mean, in everything. Yet he said they managed to largely stand by and watch the mass execution of millions of Jews, gypsies, and all kinds of people. So how did this happen? Why did this happen? And we could ask the same question about the things that are going on in our world right now. And to this effect, he said that the Nazi headquarters, I believe at Auschwitz, or one of the camps, had a letterhead. When the commanders would issue letters, there's a letterhead, right? And on the letterhead, there was a motto written, a trademark statement. You know what it said? It said, there is only one thing that is valid: orders. What is sacred, in other words, are orders. Not why the order is given, not to whom the order to kill is done, but that it is an order. So they would print on the letterhead, on their stationery, this statement in German. And all the officers obviously had to follow this statement. To such an extent that Rudolf Haas, one of the commanders of Auschwitz, said something very profound. I believe this was during the Nuremberg trials, right? When they took them to trial and they tried to, hold these people accountable for what they had done. And he says that no SS officer, these are the officers that carry out the orders of the Führer or the Hitler, would ever contemplate raising a hand against Himmler, Heinrich Himmler, I think his name was. He was basically Hitler's henchman. He was the man in charge he was the hammer of the Nazi party. No one would even contemplate raising a hand against Himmler. Haas says, not even in their most secret thoughts, for his very person was inviolable, meaning he was sacred. These are people that have no religion, yet they believe that Hitler's right-hand man, Himmler, who was in charge of, he was really the brains behind the killing operation, right? Now, the tyrants often don't think of all the mechanics of genocide on their own. They need people, they need real psychos to help them perpetrate genocide, just like we're seeing now, right? All kind of people who have degrees from, great universities. And he says that no officer would even think of it because the very orders themselves were deemed to be sacred. He said no argument and no interpretation. Period. Full stop. We are told to kill. This is his words. So this is what they will do. And this is what happens to a society when they lose themselves. In the absence of knowledge, perception, godliness, contemplation. This is what a society becomes. And you wonder why the majority of people in some countries that perpetrate genocide are actually backing their governments. You do know that. Why, again? How is a population so dehumanized to such a point that the people that are perpetrating the genocide have a full mandate from the public? It's very remarkable. وَكَانُوا مُسْتَبْصِرِينَ, and Allah says, and they know. It's not that they did not have an opportunity to know. So then a question arises here. What's the difference between unconditional obedience to a politician and a prophet? It's a question that comes up. It's a provocative one, but it's a question. The answer to that is one are monsters and the others are humans, who first lead with values of compassion and justice and love, and ask people to use their intellect and think if this is what they want to follow. And they would never ask someone to do something that is against the very values that they espouse of justice, freedom. And that's why we have the principle of adala. Every leader, according to the Imami Shia madhab, has to be adil. They have to be just. That means they have to be pious. They have to be following the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The moment that person is no longer just and adil, you cannot follow them. You cannot even pray behind them. Leave aside taking orders to go to war. That person has to be adil. Adala is a requirement. Adala means spiritual purification. Person is not an open sinner. They hold fast to the akhlaq of the Quran and the values of mercy and love and compassion. When the Quran says it is better to forgive than even to carry out punishment, right? That they're the beacon and the standard in every category, especially when it comes to the ma'asum, in every category of what it means to be a perfect human being. So to compare a Nabi, the obedience and love and submission to a Nabi or an Imam, to that of, these monsters, whether they be in the 40s or the 50s or now, it's a facile comparison. The comparison cannot be made. It's a childish, illogical comparison. One is connected, in the case of a prophet, to the sunnah of God, to the order that Allah has created in this universe, that everything they do is connected to that metaphysical principle, to the principle of God and the teachings of God. And even then they ask us to use our intellect, as Allah said, الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلَ فَبَشِّرْ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلَ وَيَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ. Allah says, give glad tidings to those who listen carefully and follow the best of what the Prophet brings them. Meaning Allah says, don't even take the Prophet at face value. Listen to what he says. Does his message confirm the message of Jesus? Does his message confirm the message of Noah? Does his message confirm the message of Dawood and David and Ibrahim? Does he live the life of a prophet? Does he live up to the values that he espouses? What is he preaching to you? This is Allah in the Quran. Even the Prophet of Allah. Now, once someone becomes a Muslim, that's different. Yes, of course. But they're told to search within their heart, and they know what is true, because there is a history of there's God's history on earth of sending prophets and sending messengers who stood with the orphans. They stood against oppression. They stood with the needy. They stood with the oppressed in society. They stood with all of these people. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. That they stood with all of these people. So they are worthy of obedience. They are worthy of love. They are deserving of submission. Not because of their words, but because of the action that they embody in their hearts and in their, not only in their hearts and manifest in their life. This is what true obedience is. Not to a politician, not to a general. Islam tells us to use our conscience based on the teachings that God has given us. Not a do-it-yourself or garage hobby. That's not what I'm saying here. Based on the principles of Allah and His Messenger and Ahlul Bayt, what they've taught. We're called upon to use this, and if we don't, we will be sheep led to the slaughter. Because we'll just be slaves to another political theory, to another idea, to another leader, or whatever it may be. Muslim or non-Muslim, everyone is held to that standard. This is not even about Muslim or non-Muslim. Everyone is held to that standard. Whether they are Shia or Sunni or Christian, everyone's held to that standard. Even the marja has to be adil. That's a requirement of marja'iyya is adala. It's not just because he's learned it. It's not just because he went and studied and became someone who has an encyclopedic knowledge of Islamic law. Piety is a requirement. But unfortunately, on the day of Ashura, we see a very different story. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
One more loud salawat, please.
And as I mentioned last night, Umar ibn Sa'd, so now I'm going from Himmler and Hitler and Nazi Germany to Umar ibn Sa'd, back in time again. You'll see where the connection it fits. It's almost like as if, like I said, the history is just cyclical. It just happens again and again when human beings live a life of sinfulness. But in order to understand what led to Umar ibn Sa'd, as I said, we have to understand his father. And I want to clarify something. When I mentioned that he was guaranteed paradise, I was being sarcastic. There's, in the school of Ahlul Sunnah wa Jama'ah, he's not in the school of Ahlul Bayt. He's not. Sa'd ibn Waqqas is not those that have been guaranteed paradise. That's in the school of other people. His father is one of those people that has been allegedly guaranteed paradise. Yet his father was the one who time and time again betrayed Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is a historical fact. This is not a matter of debate. This is a historical fact. He didn't like Ali. He had problems with him. Right? In fact, he prayed for both Muawiyah, Allah to forgive Ali and Muawiyah, because they both are wrong in his view, in the view of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. And then this kind of theology of everyone gets a participation prize comes from this. Right? Where the killer and the killed can all go to heaven and just kind of, we just leave it to God and don't use our brain now and just kind of put our brain to sleep, shut it off, and don't ask questions about these things. You know, you don't want to open Pandora's boxes. A Shaykh once told me a long time ago in Regent's Park Mosque in London. But Shias have the crime of opening Pandora's box because they're searching for adala and haq, but that's a different story. And Imam Ali's life, Salamullahi alayhi, came to be known as a sober man ruined by two things. Two things ruined his aspirations from coming alive. Two things, mu'mineen. And you're going to see the same thing with Imam Hussein. This is the point here. Point number one, the inconstancy of his friends. His friends were not consistent. The people who claimed to be his friends, claimed like Talha, like Zubayr, like others, Right? These are companions of the Prophet. Those that claimed to be with him when he needed them, they were either missing or fighting on the other side. The inconstancy of his friends, the contradictions, the inconsistency of the friends of the people who claimed to be his friends. Obviously, they were not his true friends, but the people who claimed friendship with him. This is the story of his life. This is what historians have written about his life. You can go look at Marshall Hodgson, The Venture of Islam, Volume 1, published by the University of Chicago Press. And number two, the malice and hatred of his enemies. The hatred that his enemies had towards him knew no bounds. And at the end of the day, his khilafah and rulership would come to an end through sheer brute force and evil and violence. This is the story of the prophets of the past. Anyone who stands against the status quo very often meets their end in this way. So there will be periods in history where these things happen. And Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, which is Umar ibn Sa'd's father, without a doubt played a part in the downfall of Ali's Khilafah. There's no doubt about it. But he felt, this is again coming back to the point, that there was a virtue in him staying at home and praying for Ali's forgiveness. I don't know how this adds up in a math equation. I really don't know. How can this all just add up? This is the madhab of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And we're not here to be disrespectful. This is how it is. This is what the belief system is. Muslims are not supposed to dig into these issues. Don't talk about them. They're not meant to be talked about. Shiism in itself, the madhab of Ahlul Bayt, becomes a counter-current really to this. And then the stand of Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam becomes this rallying point, because the questions that are asked from this end up opening up other doors that should, for many, would rather stay closed. They're better stayed closed, because you start opening all these doors, it's going to be mashakil. It's going to be a lot of problems now. Because you go from Umar ibn Sa'd to his papa, his father, and Baba, then what happens? Where did he learn this from? Osama ibn Zayd, same thing. Abdullah ibn Umar, the same thing, right? These guys were all saying, we don't know. We're just going to kind of hang back, chill out, let Ali go down his road. There's the son of Umar ibn al-Khattab, the son of Zayd, Osama ibn Zayd. They all were the same. But on the other hand, you had Ammar ibn Yasir with Ali. You had Muhammad, the son of Abu Bakr, with Ali. So Muslims found themselves at the crossroads in history. You had Ammar on one hand, Abdullah bin Umar on the other, Ammar ibn Yasir. These are the sons of companions of the Prophet. Now this would come to a head and a violent explosion in the year of 61 Hijrah in Karbala. All of this would come to a violent ending, because this was not sustainable. This path was not sustainable. We cannot understand the stand of Hussein unless we understood what happened before him. It's not possible. It's like you're trying to understand the Palestinian conflict without understanding Nakhba, or without understanding, the role of the British and the Americans and colonialism and all of that. You can't understand it unless you go back in history to understand what led up to this problem. It's the same thing. Someone can't just keep their eyes closed and wish it goes away. It doesn't work. Now we come to Umar ibn Sa'd. He arrives in Karbala. And what I'm going to mention to you tonight, I think might send shiver up. It sends a shiver up my spine. He arrives in Karbala, and just to remind you, he was an associate of Hussein ibn Ali. They grew up together. Remember, all these guys grew up, just like you. Some of you are the same age in this room. Abdullah bin Umar, Hussein ibn Ali, Hassan bin Ali, Osama bin Zayd, Umar ibn Sa'ad. These guys all grew up in Medina. They all know each other. Their fathers were companions of the Prophet. The fathers fought with the Prophet. You have to understand this. There were even intermarriages going on. Right? As I mentioned last night, Muslim had a connection to Umar ibn Sa'ad through family. Umar ibn Sa'ad knew who Hussein was. There was no doubt. He was not Shamar. Umar ibn Sa'ad was a Madani. Okay? He was from Medina. There ain't nobody from Medina who does not know that Hussein is the Prince of the Mu'mineen. Khalas, ijma'an. It is obvious. Everyone knows that. It's not even a matter of debate, not a matter of discussion. He arrives in Karbala, and what does it say? لَمَّا نَزَلَ عُمَرْ ibn Sa'ad bil-Hussein أَيْقَنَ أَنَّهُمْ قَاتَلُوهُ. That when Umar ibn Sa'ad arrives in Karbala, he was certain that they were going to fight him. So he already arrived with certainty. And he gets up in front of his troops. Now we think of Himmler and Hitler and all of this. There's a reason why I started with what I started. Umar ibn Sa'ad delivers a khutbah in Karbala. He gathers the troops together and he tells them, أَلَا تَرَوْنَ الْحَقِّ لَا يَعْمَلُوا بِهِ. Do you not see that the truth is not being practiced? Meaning Hussein is batil, not practicing the truth. Na'udhu billah. وَالْبَاطِل لَا يَتَنَاهَا عَنْ. And no one is doing nahi an al-munkar. Allah. This is the kalam, the words of Umar ibn Sa'ad in Karbala. لَا يَرْغَبُ الْمُؤْمِنْ فِي لِقَاءِ اللَّهِ. And he says, who from the mu'mineen, the believers, want to meet God, then you will be with me to fight Hussein. Look at this. Amazing how the oppressors use words, they twist concepts, they use God, prey on people's emotions, manipulate them. Incredible. This is how he prepared them to butcher Ali al-Radi. How else would he prepare them? People could not swallow this kind of violence. So just tell them, oh, God is with them. Anyone can use God for anything. Anybody. God is like is the most beautiful thing, obviously, our creator of the heavens and the earth, but also the most abused. Isn't it? People abuse the name of God all the time. It doesn't mean that religion is bad. Just you have to know what the Prophet teach, what the Imams teach, in order to distinguish between the falsehood and truth. But he knew that the people that he's speaking to are just going to obey orders, just like on the Nazi letterhead. An order is an order. There's no akal, no nothing. Submission. He's the army general. We got a job to do. We're going to do it. And even if it means slaughtering the grandson of the Prophet, imprisoning his women, removing their outer coverings, butchering his baby, so be it. Because an order is an order. And the only thing Umar ibn Sa'ad needed to do was to sweeten the pot by using God. Because he knew if I just appeal to their emotional sentiment, these are simpletons, simple, ignorant soldiers. I'll rile them up enough to get the job done. However, this mal'oon, munafiq, Umar ibn Sa'ad. Now things get really, really nasty. He then has a series of meetings with Hussein ibn Ali in Karbala to negotiate a truce. Meanwhile, he's already decided the decision that he's going to do. He already had certainty they were going to kill him. But he approaches Hussein. Hussein approaches him. Salam alayhi. Again, because they knew each other. Remember, these men grew up together. They were not foreigners to one another. Hussein, salamullahi alayhi, Sayyid al-Shuhada presents 2 or 3 options. I only believe in the first 2 options as being most historical. Option number 1, is I will leave from where I have come. I will leave from where I have come. Let me go. Option number 2, or I will go to Yazid in Sham and discuss directly with him. Let's skip Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. We don't need him. Let's go straight to the source. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad ain't worth my time. But the condition for all of this is I'm not giving allegiance. That's not happening. I mean, that's not on the table. That is an absolute red line, non-negotiable. Because he is the Imam. He is the Wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He cannot give allegiance to this kafir and this fasiq, this corrupt man. That's not going to happen, and it's impossible. Number 3, they say, oh, he'll go to some faraway land, frontier land. Those sources are not strong. I go with, for the first 2 are possible in the historical sources. Oh, Umar ibn Sa'd, qabala dhalik, he accepts these terms, which tells us one thing. He didn't want to fight. He was a chicken. I mean, the man was just a guy who was after his own benefit. Kataba ilayhi Ubaydullah. Ibn Ziyad now writes to him. The letter arrives in the battlefield, maybe somewhere around the 6th, 7th of Muharram. We're not entirely sure when the letter arrives from Kufa. He tells him, sorry, we're not going to accept this until Hussein's hand is over mine, meaning he pledges allegiance to the Umayyads. That's not going to happen. Fine. However, while this dealing was going on, Umar ibn Sa'd writes a letter to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad from the battlefield. This is from the battlefield. This is in the middle of negotiations. Again, I'm talking about history, how things repeat themselves. He writes a letter to Ibn Ziyad to Kufa, because Kufa is not far from Karbala. But on horse, you can get there quite fast, right? On a horseman. He says, if you give me uktub li ahad ray hatta af'alu ma ta'muru fil hal. Give me the province of Ray, Tehran, modern day southern Tehran, and I'll do what you want. Meanwhile, at the same time, he was double dealing with Abu Abdullah. These are the kind of people. The man that he grew up with. It's not that Hussein ibn Ali didn't know this, but he had to allow the process to play itself out. So people would not turn and say, well, he refused to negotiate. He didn't bring any possible way to bring an end to this. Then another letter arrives to Karbala from Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad to Karbala, most likely to Shimr, because Shimr was sent to watch over him. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad now writes, as I said, another letter to Umar ibn Sa'd, telling him that news has come to me that you and Hussein have been having private meetings. Yajlisan nahiya min al-askar yatanajiyan. Meaning Ibn Ziyad was not happy that Umar ibn Sa'd was having private one-face time with Hussein ibn Ali. Again, they knew each other. Umar ibn Sa'd knew killing him was a big deal. They grew up together. It's like you killing the guy next to you. Na'udhu billah, la samah Allah. You've known each other in this MCC how many years? You've been in Atlanta how many years together? He knew that this is fire. Like, this is fire what he's playing with fire. Ubaydullah didn't like it. So you know what he told them? Whatever the result of this, know that you are responsible if you let Hussein go. But it doesn't end there, mu'mineen. It doesn't end there. Somewhere perhaps towards the 9th of Muharram, Imam Hussein rides out with 20 horsemen, including Abbas and Ali Akbar, to meet Umar ibn Sa'd in the battlefield. Umar ibn Sa'd comes with 20 horsemen as well. Imam gives it one more chance. This is the final stand of Abu Abdullah now with him. He turns to him, and I'll narrate to you the words of what he says exactly, so I'm not interpolating the words of Abu Abdullah. He turns to Umar ibn Sa'd, he says, will you kill me knowing whose son I am? Alimta, you know whose son I am. Umar ibn Sa'd stays quiet. He has no response to it. Imam then turns again to Umar ibn Sa'd and he tells him, leave these people and join me. فَإِنُّهُ أَقْرَبُ لَكَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. Leave these people, meaning you know me, I know you, my friend, we've gone way back. There's a reason they knew each other. The Imam knew that he could speak this way to him. That if there's an ounce of humanity left in him, the Imam is going to try to bring that out of him. And he says, if you join me, you know. إِنَّهُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْكَ إِلَى اللَّهِ. This is the closest path to God, through me. Because he's the because he's the hujjah of God, right? Fine. Umar ibn Sa'd now remains silent again. Amazing. Why is he silent? Because he has no response to Hussein. He can lie to his troops. He can lie to his friends. But when a friend looks him in the eye, he didn't have anything to say. Umar ibn Sa'd remains silent, at which the Imam says, ذَبَحَكَ اللَّهُ عَلَى فِرَاشِكَ عَاجِلًا. May God slaughter you in your bed. Basically, lanat. May Allah remove His mercy from you. He says, you will never, ever enjoy the fruits of Iraq. Ever. Umar ibn Sa'd turns to him, laughing. He says, well, I'll settle with whole wheat, with sha'ir, with barley. And that was their final words. Two men who grew up together. But he did not listen to that voice within him. Imam gave him chance after chance after chance. Look at the rahmah of Hussein ibn Ali. Just think about it. He was, na'udhu billah, not on a suicide mission. This is not a right way to think about it. This was not a suicide mission. Does this sound like a suicide mission? No, not at all. This is not what history tells us. Hussein ibn Ali was a wise, prudent, empathetic person who tried to speak to the heart of Umar ibn Sa'd. But when all else failed, he sentenced him to the worst sentence he could ever have, which is, may Allah slaughter you in your bed. Now that's not a dua you want against you from Hussein ibn Ali. And Umar ibn Sa'd deep down knew. But then things would get worse, mu'mineen. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad would write again to the battlefield, right? This is all in the history. Mu'mineen, we should know this history. Another letter arrives in Karbala, now ordering the cutting off of water to Umar ibn Sa'd. It was Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad ordering Umar ibn Sa'd to cut off the water. Umar ibn Sa'd is now digging one hole after another after another. So now let's pause. What do Muslims think about him in history? Unfortunately, we read in history that some Muslims, not Shia obviously, consider him, Umar ibn Sa'd, to be a reliable transmitter of hadith. In fact, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, the famous scholar of the biography of narrators for Ahlul Sunnah, the school of Ahlul Sunnah wa Jama'ah, in volume 7 of Tahdhib, says Umar ibn Sa'd huwa Sadduq. Ibn Hajar is one of the most famous scholars of hadith in Islamic history. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, Sahib Lisan al-Mizan, Tahdhib, very important person. Google him. Not now, later. You'll see his whole books are, libraries about him. His contribution to Islam and civilization and hadith. And other people have said, no, he's not right on this. I'm not saying this is a general opinion. But there is an opinion that Umar ibn Sa'd, although he participated in the fighting of Hussein, which is admitted to by all, but he's not to blame for it, as the Hadith says in Mizan al-I'tidal. That he was forced into this. Umar ibn Ziyad sent him there, they say, and he threatened his family if he doesn't kill Hussein, he's going to do something. So what do you want to do? Let the man go now. He's thiqa, he narrates hadith of the second stage. He's tabi'i. And you actually find narrations from him in Bukhari. Quite interesting. This is quite damning. I mean, I don't know how somebody can square this. How does somebody believe that Umar ibn Sa'd is a reliable transmitter of hadith? Not only that, saduq, honest, sincere, and trustworthy are the definitions of the word saduq, from the word sadaqah, sidq, truthfulness. That's a high title to have. So not all Muslims were on board with Ahlul Bayt. Let's just leave it at that. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Umar ibn Sa'd would be mocked for the rest of his life because he had the dua of Imam Hussein against him. Imam said, may Allah slaughter you in your bed, and that would come true, meaning, may you be finished. He never got the governorship. Everybody knows this. Everywhere he went, he was cursed by people. People would insult him wherever he went. His life was absolutely miserable after Karbala. He had to live with the killing of Hussein on his conscience, and he had to live with the fact that everybody knew that he was the man who commanded that army. And obviously Mukhtar Thaqafi would catch up with him eventually, and he would kill him. And he brought the head of Umar to his son Hafs. And he says, do you know who this is? He says, yes. Then Mukhtar kills Hafs as well. Because Hafs was Umar ibn Sa'd's son, who also participated in the killing of Hussein with him. It was a father and son joint job. Real parenting time, huh? Quality time with dad. Well, I mean, they already had quality time in fighting Imam Ali, right? So why not now kill Hussein ibn Ali? Or at least in standing aside from supporting Ali. So it just takes one step to the next. The father, Sa'd, he didn't do any of this, but he just stood back. Then the son, and then the son of Umar ibn Sa'd was even worse, Hafs, we know. I mean, he was a real nasty one. Muqtar killed them both. And he sent the head to Imam Zayn al-Abidin. This is narrated in Sunni and Shia traditions. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And in fact, we know, I wasn't sure if I wanted to narrate this, but I will. Fine. Umar ibn Sa'd was quite a sicko. He had a box of whips. This is widely narrated. And he used to enjoy beating his servants. Yeah, these guys were, I mean, in order to watch the starvation and beating and killing of the grandson of the Prophet, you have to be a sicko. I mean, this guy was, it's not sicko in the sense he didn't know what he was doing was wrong, but he had a propensity for violence. It's narrated that once he whipped his servant so bad, for nothing sometimes, just because he had all these sick inclinations, just like these Hitler and all these people. That's what I'm saying here, right? Orders are orders, and usually when you want someone to carry out these things, they choose the sickest, the most twisted of them to do it. And that servant made a dua against him as well. The historians say he made a dua against him that may you be humiliated for what you've done to me. And some say that it was Mukhtar who was the deliverer, who was the jawab of the dua of that servant as well. And Umar ibn Saad will be reminded of all of this. This is your punishment now. Your life has now come to an end. We will track you down. You will be finished for the crimes that you've committed. But now we have another person named Hur, also a commander of the army. But he had a very different story, didn't he? Why? For one simple reason, mu'mineen and mu'minat. Because he listened to that voice when it says, Inni ukhayyiru bayna jannah wa nar. That I have to choose between heaven and hell. When he was hearing the cries of Hussein, Hal min nasin yansuruna. Is there anyone to help us? Is there anyone who believes in God? Is there anyone who believes in Tawheed? Hud was listening to this over and over and over again. These words entered his heart. And that's why we read in the traditions that he found himself in a major predicament. And he retreated into a moment of silence, to a moment of contemplation, because we need to do that at times. We need that time to disconnect, close our eyes and say, I need to be with the truth now. I need to ask myself, what would God want from me in this moment? In this very moment of my life. And his companion, the person who he was with, saw him and saw something strange. He could see that something's going on. Remember, Hur was not an ordinary soldier. He was a commander. He was the one responsible for cornering the Imam in Karbala to begin with. After Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad sent reinforcements to Karbala. And his companion, as I said, Muhajir bin Aus, realized this, and he saw him shivering. And Hur tells himself, Wallah, even if I'm burnt alive and I'm cut into pieces, I will choose heaven over hell. And heaven is only with Hussein ibn Ali. He knew this. But this part is so touching as well. As he rode on his horse to the camp of Hussein, crossing over from the camp of the Umayyads, Umar ibn Saad, over to the camp of Hussein, he had his hand on his head. And when he arrives in front of Hussein ibn Ali, he says, Allahumma inni, oh Allah, Allahumma inni tibtu ilayk. فَتُبْ عَلَيْهِ. Oh Allah, I have done repentance to you. So accept my tawbah now. He says, I have struck fear into the hearts of your beloved ones. I have struck fear into the hearts of the children of the Prophet. Oh Allah, forgive me for this. And he turns to Hussein ibn Ali, salamullahi alayhi, and he asks him, do you see that though my repentance will be accepted? Because he knew that his repentance could only be accepted through the wasilat of Hussein, through the intermediation of Hussein ibn Ali. There was no way that after everything that he has done, that his repentance could be accepted. But Hussein, in the expanse of his heart, the size of his heart, the opportunity that Umar ibn Saad did not take, now Hur took, which was the forgiveness of Hussein ibn Ali, salamullahi alayhi. He says, Hal tara li min tawbah? Do you think this will be accepted? Hussein says, Naam yatubullah alayk. Allah has accepted your tawbah, O Hur. And we know because of that. He says, since I was the first one, I revolted against you. Let me go out to fight. And he says, all the people of Kufa, by your Jahili mothers, you invited this man, Al-Abd al-Saleh, this righteous servant of God. He came to you, and so that you would submit to his guidance, aslamtu. You claimed you would rather die instead of him. Now today you are full of hatred towards him. Now today you are here to kill him. You would not even allow him to leave and venture out in the vast earth of God. Meaning even Hur is trying to find a way to save the children of Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam. He says, you have made Hussein a prisoner in front of you, such that he has now become helpless and powerless. He can't even defend himself from harm. Now we are talking thousands against less than 100 army. He says, you have denied the water of the Furat to Hussein. You have denied the water to his women. You have denied the water to his children. And that flowing water that Jews, Zoroastrians, and Christians can drink from, yet Hussein ibn Ali is denied that very same water. Not only a Muslim, Hujjatullahi fil ard, the proof of Allah, is denied the water that Yahud and Masihin and Nasara and Christians are drinking from. He turns to them, do you not have any shame? Here is the grandson of the Prophet. He says, even wild dogs, Khanazir Sawad, they are rolling in this water. Even the pigs are drinking from this water, yet you deny this same water to Hussein ibn Ali. Hur goes out and he fights very valiantly. He fights until he was martyred. ثم استشهد ثم استشهد, and then he is martyred. فحمل إلى الحسين, and he's brought towards Hussein. Hussein begins to wipe the dirt from his face. Imagine this moment, mu'mineen and mu'minat. Hur's head is in the lap of Hussein ibn Ali. Look at the love that Imam has for Hur. Hur has just become a mu'min in this moment. Yet the love of Hussein, the rahmah of Hussein, the karama of Hussein, the generosity of Hussein, is that he begins to wipe the dirt from the face of Hur. And he says, you are free as your mother named you. But mu'mineen, there was another Sahabi I want to narrate to you tonight, and his name is Habib ibn Mudahir. Habib, when he arrived in Karbala, he kissed the ground in front of Hussein ibn Ali, and he sent his salam to Zainab. When Zainab heard this, she asked Hussein, who is this person that has sent salam to me? He says, this is Habib ibn Mudahir. He has just arrived from Kufa. Zainab says, reply my salam to him. فَلَمَّا بَلَغُوهُ سَلَامَهَا, and when her salam arrived at Habib, he took dirt and حَثَّ التُّرَابَ عَلَى رَأْسِهِ, he began throwing dirt on his face, and he said, who am I to get the salam of Zainab bint Ali? Look at the ihtaram and respect they had for Ahlul Bayt. Even to get the salam of Zainab for Habib was something that Habib felt that I don't even deserve the salam of Zainab, salamullahi alayha. This was a man who was so courageous that when he saw the spear going into the tent, he went to Hussein ibn Ali. He says, Hussein, salamullahi alayhi, oh my Imam, the enemies are getting close. I only wish to meet Allah. Do you give me permission to go out to fight? And he began screaming at the women and children. This is the enemy screaming at the women and children, saying, I have fire. I am going to burn down this tent. Hussein, salamullah alayhi, yells at Shimr. Now Habib has to go out into battle to defend his Imam. It was Habib, the commander of the left flank, on the day of Ashura, that told Hussein, due to the danger, that he says, may my soul be ransom for you. Habib goes out to fight. He engages them in many battles. He says, for you shall not be killed until I am killed. He tells his Imam, you will not be killed until I am killed. Until they gathered around this man. He was around 60 years old. He was hidden on the head with the sword. He falls off of his horse. He's now hit again by Hasin ibn Tamim upon his head. He then gets off of his horse and he beheads Habib ibn Mudahir. فَحَتَّى says, عند الله يحتسب نفسي. Oh Allah, I take my sadness to you, meaning I protest to you, Allah. My solace is with you, oh Allah. The difficulty of my companions are with you. But Mu'mineen, I want to end on just one note, very briefly, Mu'mineen and Mu'minat. Focus on this one moment here. Why was Habib beloved to Hussein ibn Ali? Why was he beloved? For this we have to go back to the life of the Prophet. That one day the Prophet saw Habib, يَمْسُهُ بِهِ وَجْهَا وَعَيْنَا, that he was wiping the face and the eyes of Hussein ibn Ali. And he says, فَأَنَا أُحِبُّهُ لِحُبِّهِ لِوَلَدِي الْحُسَيْنِ. I love him for his love for my son Hussein ibn Ali. But on the day of Yawm al-Ashir, who would wipe the dirt from the face of Hussein ibn Ali when his face was in the earth? As-salamu ala khadd al-tarib. Peace be upon the cheek that is covered in turab. Mu'mineen, there was no one to wipe the eyes of Hussein from his dam and his blood. There was no one to wipe the face of Hussein from the dirt as they threw rocks over him. There was no Habib on that day to wipe the eyes of Hussein. Who would wipe the tears of Hussein when the blood of his son is all over his chest? Who would wipe the tears of Hussein ibn Ali when in the corner of his eyes he could see his tents on fire? There was no one to wipe the tears of Hussein. There was no one to wipe the turab and the dirt from the face of Hussein ibn Ali. That is why we say, As-salamu ala gharib al-ghuraba, Ya Abu Abdullah, Ya Sadar Hussein. He is gharib al-ghuraba. This is the ghurbat of Hussein ibn Ali, the wahda and the loneliness of Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam, when he laid there in that moment of absolute pain and loneliness, covered in his own blood, covered in the dirt of the earth that he would soon return to, bathed in that state. La'natullahi alaykum al-zalimin. Matam Hussein.
Ya Hussein.